The 90s, a simple time. Well, simple for me because I was 4 years old in 1990 and 13 years old in 1999 when the Phantom Menace came out. I was a 90s kid. Grew up with Space Ghost Coast to Coast, Power of the Force, Pogs, Earthworm Jim, and Booger Man. Are You Afraid of the Dark and Hey Dude. Qzar and this piece of crap that never worked right. Fire, fire, fire! Played street hockey every day in the cul-de-sac, rode bikes everywhere all day. Broke bones, put sugar on top of my sugary cereal because, hey man, no one said I couldn't. Ricky Winterbore. Turned on adult mode in Duke Nukem 3D, watched an alien pop out of a man's chest when I was like 6 years old. Nintendo Power was my news source. I wore that Star Fox promo VHS out, my dude. Rummaging through PC games at CompUSA, buying parental advisory CDs. Goosebumps, goosebumps, goosebumps. Dark Forces and the diarrhea water slide of Anote City. My mom taking me out of school early to go see Mars attacks in the middle of the day. The sun set on a summer that felt like forever, bringing with it a back-to-school JanSport filled with the promise of a new adventure. My family got its first computer in 1995. A shiny Pentium 133 housed in a dull brownish gray nondescript case. I was immediately on the internet. At the age of 9, I trekked through GeoCities and Angel Fire, even making my own video game cheat code websites. The internet was a new and exciting and, relative to today, innocent world, as far as I knew. There was not a ton of Star Wars content out there, at least not easily discoverable. Nothing that I remember seeing, at least in those early days. Not until the prequels were announced, that is. But even then, I never really sought out any Star Wars news on the internet. Back then, you know, I was 9 years old and I probably didn't even see the internet as a source of information. Instead, I subscribed to Star Wars Insider. Magazines like this would come in the mail monthly. Magazines chock full of juicy Star Wars information. Pictures that I would just sit and look at for hours. The same pages, the same pictures, over and over again, just letting my mind wander, imagining what the new Star Wars movies were going to be like. Every generation looks back fondly at the years in which they were a kid. I'm not saying the 90s were better than any other decade. I'm not saying they were better than today. They weren't. It's all subjective, but it was my decade. See, I have no memory of the first time that I saw Star Wars. It's just always been there, cemented in my mind for as long as I have memories. I don't have a time frame in my brain that was before Star Wars. I was born into it, shown it at a very early age, obviously, and lived with it as a Siamese twin since I could form memories. I grew up watching the original trilogy on repeat. My family had a big van with a TV and a VCR in the backseat, and the VHS of Star Wars: A New Hope always played on road trips. The statement, "I am an original trilogy guy," is one of the truest statements I can make about myself and this fandom. It's just what I grew up with. It's all that I knew. It's all that there was. These magazines were my and so many others' window to the broader fandom, a portal to information, a pathway to excitement, a gateway to opinions, no social media, no constant stream of Star Wars news or hot takes, no conspiratorial thinking about those involved in the production, just these magazines. They were the heart and soul of my Star Wars diet. Along with talking to my friends about the wars, of course. I was not on forums and I didn't visit chat rooms, at least not at first, not in the mid-90s. You know, they existed, but I didn't take part in them. I probably didn't even know that they existed at the time. I had 2 childhood best friends. We would constantly watch Star Wars, play Star Wars, talk Star Wars, and it was quaint. It felt small. It felt small scale, you know? I'm really curious if, you know, like 10-year-olds nowadays are active on the internet and see the fandom. Again, I'm not saying my experience was better, it was just different, but I'm really curious if some 10-year-olds out there are watching like way too online internet talking heads, perpetually online people constantly bitch and moan about inconsequential entertainment bullshit. You know, they're too young to recognize the grift. Are these grown men really mad about Barbie? Like, who fucking cares? It's dumb. It's transparent. And you know, these 10-year-olds, they're too young to understand the monetization of feigned outrage. I hope they don't see that's like a cool or normal way to act, because anyone other than the perpetually online sees that kind of stuff as an embarrassment. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, the 90s. We played Star Wars. I don't mean video games. Yeah, we played the hell out of those too, especially when the Nintendo 64 came out, but I mean we played Star Wars, running around with fake blasters, throwing pinecone thermal detonators out of the backyard playset, playing with super buff Power of the Force Luke Skywalker. Those Power of the Force figures were everything, man. They were released in 1995, and they were really the first time my generation got a new major series of Star Wars action figures and toys. Star Wars felt more individual and intimate in the 90s, from my experience. It was you and your obsession, and the only people you really shared that obsession with was your immediate friends. Yeah, Star Wars was a global, monumental franchise with an enormous and devoted fan base, but they were relatively invisible to me. Star Wars was, as I said, a more individual thing in the 90s. You know, we spoke about it in comic shops or the school cafeteria, or in the cul-de-sac, or in the backyard, or in a tent, or in front of the Nintendo 64. It was nothing like the overt, constant flood of opinions and front and center fandom we see scattered across the internet nowadays. Now, it is so easy to find like-minded individuals from all over the globe at the press of a button. It makes the buzz feel that much larger when you have your ear to millions of fans. It feels like a much larger collective than it did when I grew up. And that's only because the lack of exposure. Sidebar, my Christmas list from 1998. Zelda, Cruisin' World, a lava lamp, Nike and Tommy and Reebok stuff.
Super cool.
Big drawing paper, guitar picks, weird ones, cardboard cutout of Sammy Sosa, Age of Empires, subscription to Nintendo Power, baseballs, Saving Private Ryan movie, CD holder, Cubs or Braves fitted hats, Beatles CDs, Diablo 2. Yeah, this Christmas list still holds up. Oh man, do you remember the Star Wars collectible card game? It was released in 1995, just a big box of beautiful cards that you could play a game with. I don't know if my friends and I ever actually knew how to play the damn game. We just looked at the cards. Maybe we'd throw 2 cards down and be like, who would win in a fight? But that's the extent of us actually playing it from what I remember. It was just fun to look at all the cards. I highly doubt my parents still have this in their attic. I've pretty much gutted everything from my childhood out of their house, and it's now in my attic. And I have not seen the Star Wars collectible card game or customizable card game in decades. To me, in the 90s, there were 4 main releases, 4 main Star Wars events in the 90s. Heir to the Empire was released in 1991, Shadows of the Empire was released in 1996, the special editions were released in the theater in 1997, and the Phantom Menace came out in 1999. And I'll talk about each one of those really fast. I remember picking up Heir to the Empire at a middle school book fair sometime in the mid to late 90s. I know I read it, but I don't really remember it. I'm sure a lot of it went over my pre-teen head. I'm actually reading it right now again on my Kindle. I have more memories of the Scholastic Book Fair, the actual event, than the Heir to the Empire book itself. Those book fairs were amazing. I looked forward to them every school year, trinkets and knickknacks to buy, funky pencil erasers, themed bookmarks, random educational toys like this skeleton model, and of course, books. I also picked up the junior novelization of both Shadows of the Empire and the Phantom Menace at the middle school book fair as well through the years. My memories of those books are similar to Heir to the Empire. It's slim, it's a slim memory, but I still have those books, which is kind of cool, and they still have my name written on the inside cover. The Shadows of the Empire book was exciting because it came out alongside the Shadows of the Empire toy line and the Shadows of the Empire Nintendo 64 game. It was a major event for Star Wars. This big new adventure being released in multiple mediums. For me, the game was where it was at, dude. I still play that game. I even have the Nintendo 64 cartridge command stripped to my office wall. As a kid, I remember being terrified of IG-88 or those ATSTs, but after logging like 1 billion hours in Shadows of the Empire over the past 27 or so years, those guys are no match. The Nintendo 64 was magical. I treated my Nintendo Power magazines the same way I treated my Star Wars Insider magazines. Staring at the pictures, reading the same blurbs, just getting excited for things to come. Shadows of the Empire will forever have a special place in my heart. Is it wonky? Yeah. Are the controls sometimes complete ass? Yeah. But man, it was such a fun adventure for a 10-year-old. I was playing Star Wars, I was flying Star Wars, I was experiencing a new Star Wars story in the palm of my hands. It's amazing. I saw the special editions in the movie theater in 1997. It was an amazing experience. Seeing the Holy Trinity on the screen for the first time in my life in a movie theater was amazing. At the time, no one knew the original trilogy as we all knew it was going to be changed forever, and definitely irreversibly changed forever. If we knew that all future releases of Star Wars would include these changes and more, and that the theatrical cuts we all grew up with would be left in the trash bin of history, I think our reactions and excitement for the special edition release would have been a lot different. Nevertheless, I was super excited. It was just cool seeing them on the big screen for the first time in my life. This 1995 VHS box set was my pride and joy. The last full release of the theatrical cut before the special editions dominated the future. Do you remember the first time you saw the Phantom Menace trailer? I don't. I personally have no memory of seeing it for the first time. The trailer, that is. It might have been in the movie theater before like Adam Sandler's Waterboy or something like that. Or it might have been at home on the internet after it took absolutely forever for that thumbnail-sized trailer to download. Or it might have been on TV during like Entertainment Tonight or something. I really don't remember the first time I saw that trailer, but I remember watching it numerous times. And oh my God, that anticipation, that buzz, that excitement. If you're younger and you weren't around in the mid to late 90s, the hype was on par with the hype for The Force Awakens. Everything was Star Wars. Colonel Sanders and the Taco Bell Chihuahua and a Pizza Hut delivery girl fought battle droids on Naboo. Pepsi cans were splattered with Episode 1 imagery. Kids' meal toys everywhere. It was just everywhere. Just non-stop excitement. I used to go into a comic shop outside of Atlanta, Georgia, where I lived, called Titan Comics. And Star Wars was all those guys would talk about. I would walk into Toys R Us and KB Toys, and it was just wall-to-wall Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace merchandise. Even Leonardo DiCaprio got in on the action. The hype was so unbelievable, man. George Lucas was coming back to make more of what we all loved. It was like a dream, completely surreal. Yeah, we were all super hyped for The Force Awakens too, but now we're so inundated with Star Wars stuff. That long anticipation isn't really there anymore for the franchise as a whole. At least not for me. Because there's constantly something new coming out or being announced. Shows, cartoons, movies, you name it. Back then you waited years and years and years. It was a long game, a long build-up. It was an exercise in patience. For that reason, the build-up and excitement, to me at least, relative to today, was way higher. And that level of excitement I don't think will ever be what it once was. What's funny to me, and this is just like a little tidbit of information that I discovered through kind of researching a few things in this video, the trailer for The Phantom Menace played before the movie Meet Joe Black. And a lot of people paid for a ticket to see Meet Joe Black just to see the Phantom Menace trailer. And attendance shot up like 1,100% at a lot of theaters because people just wanted to watch the trailer. People went in, bought a ticket to see a movie just to watch a trailer. I love it. 1999 was the first time I ever ventured onto Star Wars forums, primarily theforce.net. I didn't post much, maybe a couple times. I was more of a lurker, you know, I was young. I just wanted to gauge what people were thinking and where the speculation was going. It was relatively subdued and calm at first, and then after the release of the movie, holy hell. I know we're all so used to the headbutting and us versus them and toxicity and over-the-top mudslinging of today's social media fandom culture, but rest assured that all of the current attitude we see is pretty much identical to what was going on back then. It was just smaller. Forums, chat rooms, comic shops. It got heated, it got gross, but it was confined to small sections of the internet, and it was way easier to ignore. You actually had to seek it out, almost, you know. It wasn't always in your face on every single platform you're already on just to keep in contact with your family. I saw The Phantom Menace multiple times in the theater. It didn't really hit me. It didn't blow me away. I remember being slightly disappointed at the age of 13, but hey, I still had my original trilogy VHS tapes, and I just watched those constantly. Of course, I loved the ending lightsaber fight in The Phantom Menace, as did most people. But even at the age of 13, I knew, to me at least, it wasn't on par with the original trilogy. It didn't feel right. Nowadays, The Phantom Menace is actually my favorite Star Wars prequel, and a lot of that has to do with nostalgia, of course. The build up to that movie was just so much fun to be a part of and witness. The buzz, the anticipation, that's what I have nostalgia for. The movie is whatever. It just reminds me of simpler times, I suppose. Star Wars in the 90s felt small and quaint, but it absolutely was not. It felt that way though. To a preteen bouncing around middle school, it felt that way. Star Wars in the 90s was a lot like the 90s itself. Analog kids in a growing digital world. It was a promising time. It was a more individual experience. Canon didn't really matter all that much. Not like it does today. We all had our own headcanon. Maybe that's just because there wasn't as much out there as there is today. It just felt more Bush League. Stories that were out there and sometimes haphazardly put together, so it seemed, in a big sea of weird-ass comic covers and gritty low-poly video games. Star Wars in the 90s to me was sitting in front of my Pentium 133 PC playing Dark Forces, plopped on the floor with friends flying a jetpack in Shadows of the Empire, looking through the Star Wars customizable card game, reading Star Wars Insider, throwing thermal detonator pine cones at friends, playing with Power of the Force action figures in my room. I'm sure this experience is the same for all generations of Star Wars fans. The names are different, the toys are different, the games are different. Despite what decade you find yourself growing up with the wars, your experience was probably very similar to mine. Just different games, different toys, different places to play. But the 90s was where I found my love for Star Wars. So, for that, and many other reasons, it holds a special place in my heart.